All right, guys. This morning, I want to do a review of a kayak. Now, this is a kayak that really wasn't on my radar until, it became a sponsor for the FKBT this past season. And I really didn't know a whole lot about it. When I won Angler of the Year, part of the prize was a kayak from this company. And the company's called Vanhunks. They have a warehouse based here in the US, down in Sarasota, Florida, and they make kayaks and they make stand-ups, paddle boards, and some other things like that. Now, I didn't really know about their fishing kayaks, and they have a few. They don't have a ton, so they're not like a Hobie or Native or Old Town kind of well-known name, and I didn't really know a lot about them until I started researching them. And the more I researched this kayak, the more excited I was to actually win it. So I'm going to do a review on the Elite Angler Pro 13 from Vanhunks. I'm going to give you everything that I need to break down in terms of what is there basically with the kayak, then what it takes to get it rigged up and things you need to be looking for. Thought about splitting it into 2 videos, but I couldn't justify doing 2 videos on this. So it's going to be a longer video. I'm going to try to break it into sections and try to keep it as short and as informative as possible. So with that being said, as a disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by Vanhunks and I didn't pay for this kayak. So keep those 2 things in mind as we go forward. So let's get this thing started. So behind me right now is the Vanhunks Elite Angler Pro 13. It's a 13-foot kayak. And let me give you a fly around and kind of tell you about the things that you should know about this before you consider purchasing one. We'll talk about the real basic stuff first, then I'll talk about how I have it rigged up, then we'll take it out in the water and I'll do some demonstrations for you. First things first, this kayak comes in at $1,445, typically is your MSRP or sale price. This kayak does not come with a pedal drive. It's made for fishing, it's 13 foot, but more importantly, this kayak is super lightweight. For being a 13-foot kayak, the hull by itself weighs just 77 pounds. Now, I don't know many other 13-foot kayaks that are built for fishing that weigh just 77 pounds. So the weight of the kayak is what initially intrigued me. And it's rotomolded polyethylene, just like all the other kayaks. But at 13 feet and only weighing 77 pounds, that meant I could still car top it on top of my SUV. So that was one of the things that really got me interested in this kayak. Like, it wasn't a kayak that I wouldn't figure out how to haul. I can get it on top of the car. Now, I can't jerk and lift it like I can with the 10-foot Native that I have, but I can easily push it up on there, one-man it, and it's not a problem. So at 1445, 13 foot, those are 2 really good numbers. Because 1, it doesn't mean you have to have a big vehicle to kind of tote this around, and 2, it's not going to break the bank. Now, it does come with a pedal drive or a fin pedal drive if you're interested. Those are extra, but those are options you can add to it, and we'll get to that in a second. So let me run down this kayak from bow to stern and tell you everything that's gone on just as the kayak itself. So at the front, we have this molded plastic handle, which is nice because it's not one that's bolted in. So if you got a heavy load and you're dragging the kayak from the front, you're not worried about pulling that handle off. Every now and then my Native creaks a little bit, freaks me out. But this is nice because it's part of the kayak, so it should not fail. Moving back, we have this kind of hatch. It's got this little rubber cover on it. Now, this is one thing that I do miss about the other kayaks that I've had. There's no dry well here, so this is it. But to solve that issue, I keep most of my stuff in dry bags anyway. So I've got my tool bags in there right now. And then I'll also put my lunchbox in here. My wet weather gear, I have a 5-gallon NRS dry bag that I'm just gonna roll up and tuck under here anyway. If you look at this, here's a plate right here, just a plastic plate, but it's access to the hull. So if you wanna run wiring from here back underneath the seat or anywhere else because you've modded the kayak, drilled a hole in it to allow wiring to come through for like your battery or anything other setup that you have, then this is where you're going to access it from the front. This cover also has a kind of a slip up here in the front. So if you want to slide your paddle under there, you can, or you can add something else under there, another little bag, something like that. So that's nice. But we are missing the dry hull, which is something that I kind of enjoyed having, keeping my stuff in the kayak at all times, but it is what it is. As we move back, this is where the kayak kind of gets interesting, and you kind of see that there's some thought put into this. So the first thing here is this box. So this box is a box for your fish finder. So inside the box, which just attaches this way, lift that up, you can open it up. I store the battery and the wiring. I have it coming out the back, which at some point I'm probably going to drill a hole this way to allow the wiring to come out. Right now it's kind of crimped, but I'm not too worried about it. It's not a lot of pressure on it. There's a rail system right here, which allows like your Yak Attack fish finder holder to sit on top, which I think is nice. It keeps the fish finder centered. We're not looking over the side. It's not stopping me from flipping a fish into the boat. And then more importantly, right here, this hole is your access for your transducer. So down below, there are several brass fittings that allow you to mount your transducer to the bottom side of the kayak. Also on the bottom side of the kayak, there's like this plastic mesh that guards the transducer. So if you go to hit something, your transducer isn't gonna get it ripped off, which is nice. It will fit up to like a triple shot transducer from Lowrance. So that's a big transducer. So if you're interested in mounting that, you probably have to mount it backwards, but you can put it in there and it sits up in the hull. It shouldn't affect side scan, but that depends on your model, how good the model is. Moving back off to the sides here, we have our rail system. There's a decent amount of rail system here. You can add like your Yak Attack holders or anchor locks or things like that. There's plenty of rail systems on both sides. So there's plenty of that. My only complaint is that the rail system actually is up quite a bit. And with this being a 13-foot kayak, there's a big gap between here and let's say the back of the kayak where I would store a battery. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're running wires outside and you're not using a long wire to, let's say, go up through the hull. That's one thing you want to kind of keep in mind. You notice here we have foot pedals, and this kayak, what's nice about this, it can be either driven by feet or it can be driven by hand or steered. Let's put it that way. So these toe pedals actually come ready to be rigged up for steering. Right now you can see the cable on. I've got it loose. I've got it rigged up for the handle instead. But this is an option you can have if you want to have a bow or a stern mounted motor and just want to control it with your feet. You can do that, no problem. They're adjustable. Obviously flip this up, slide this up or down where you want it, and lock it back down in place. Coming back just a little bit further, we have two rod holders, forward facing rod holders. You know, if you're rigging or if you've got a fish in the boat, you need to set somewhere, one on either side. And all the rod holders on this boat actually come with this real nice capper here like that to keep water from getting in. I think this is more important for surf fishing where you're gonna be dealing with waves and things like that, but if it's raining and stuff, you don't want water getting in there, getting on your handles, or putting your fishing rod back down in there with water. So it's nice to kind of have that to block it out. It's just a little quality of life thing. So this is the fin drive system. It's very much reminiscent of like the Hobie Mirage 180, more so the Vibe kayak drive system. It has adjustable pedals. This costs extra. If you want to pick this up, it's going to cost $5.99. So the kayak with this bundled together, I believe, is right around $2,000. You can also get a prop drive for this. They have a prop drive made specifically for this with a different kind of box it installs here, and then it connects to the front up there. So if you want to have that instant reverse, you can have that with a prop drive. It's a little bit more expensive, but again, it's an option you can have. Now with this fin drive, there's no reverse. So you won't be able to go in reverse. You can take it up, flip it around, drop it back in, and it'll work that way. But that's one thing I'm willing to sacrifice, not having that instant reverse for other things that this kayak comes with. Check this out. If you happen to have a Hobie or a Mirage 180 drive, it will fit in there. So it should also fit the Vibe kayak drive too. So if you have one and you want that instant reverse and you just want a lighter kayak to take along, this may be an option for you. For me, I'm not gonna have the instant reverse. That's okay though. I think there's other things in this kayak that benefit having this over just the instant reverse. Having that pedal drive makes it super easy to go through a lot of grass that I would normally get caught up on. Now the pedal drive comes with this box. This box is not part of the kayak, it's part of the pedal drive system. The box that comes with it is a toolbox which fits in here a little bit more snug. Now, it's held in with these screws and these kind of clamps, which they're okay and they hold it nice and tight. My only issue is with these, you gotta watch where you're walking because you don't want to step on them because it hurts. And you'll notice when I get the motor up and running, when I'm trying it out in the water, water will creep up along these sides here because it doesn't hold in as tight as the box. And I solved that by putting in some weather stripping around the side. I would go with 1/4 inch. I went with 8 inch and put multiple layers. I think 1/4 inch would be more than enough. Moving back just a little bit further, here we have these nice molded handles on the side for lifting the kayak. They also double as your cup holder. So they fit my Yeti cooler or my Yeti thermostat nicely. I bumped it multiple times and it hasn't fallen out, so that's good. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it is, but it is. You also notice that there's like these foot pads here. And I think when they built this kayak, they also thought about surf fishermen or people who were going to be fishing lagoons and stuff for redfish and whatnot. allow you to step up onto these and kind of give you a little bit more height. I haven't personally used them, probably won't use them, but that option is there if you want it. They've also got a bunch of nice foam pads in here for walking on. For the most part, the kayak's hull is actually pretty sturdy and it doesn't flex up here. Coming back just a little bit further, we have our seat. It's very comparable to the native Slayer seat. It's mesh, it's very comfortable. It's not as high as I'd like it to be. I wish it was up like another maybe 2 inches, or at least an inch. But it is what it is. That's their design on it. So it's fairly simple. It's actually quite comfortable. The one thing I will complain about though is the seat, how it actually sits in here. So we have a rail system here, which is nice. It's just like the native system, except that there's these loops that the seat slides in like this, and then they're screwed down in the back. You can see that this one right here is kind of out a little bit. I'm just gonna, all right, now that's in, it's not going anywhere. One of the big complaints is it took me about 15 minutes to get this seat in because the seat has to slide into these loops. I think it'd be better if we had a clamp system where they sat down, clamped over and screwed in. The other thing is, if you look here, there's a little bit of a gap. So if you slide back hard on the seat, you're gonna end up knocking the seat out of the rail. So what I did is I took these pegs from the back well and I attached them here as stoppers so that it won't slide back. So the seat isn't going anywhere. It's just a design thing that I think could be improved upon. Now, the nice thing about this kayak is that it does come with a tray underneath. So like the native kayaks, you can get a tray. This one actually comes with it. Nice little cover, keep my tools in there, keep extra soft plastics I'm gonna be using. If you don't want it to slide around, you just tighten it down right there. So that's actually pretty nice. And you'll notice this right here, this well. So if the water does pull up here, like I mentioned, especially when you're running the motor, the water will travel back. And what I do is I've had these scupper plugs right here removed. I just pulled them out and the water will actually fill up and drain out that way, which makes it super easy to keep the kayak clear of water. The other thing that you'll notice here, let me see if I can slide this up just a little bit so you can see. Underneath the seat here, there's another plastic plate to allow you access to the hull for wiring and such. So as we come out to the side, you'll notice on either side there are 2 tackle box holders, and they both fit Plano 3600 series fairly easily, which is nice. You also see that we have a paddle holder, so if you don't have a place to put your paddle, you can actually store it right here on the side of the kayak, which is something that my Pelican had that my native didn't have, which is something I missed. But now I have the double header rotor grip, so I don't necessarily need these, but if I ever lose that, well, I've got somewhere to put the kayak, and there's one on each side. Here is the steering handle for the rudder. Now the biggest complaint about this is it's kind of loose, right? It's cord, it's not wire, so you have to kind of retie it a couple times to get it where you need it to be. But for the most part, it actually steers really, really well. And I prefer having the handle over using the toe controls anyway. If we come to the back here, this is the back start of the well. So this is a dry hatch. You can lift this out and access the hull underneath if you want to. I don't really need to get down in there. I don't like modding my kayaks. So I'm gonna pull this right back down in. And right now I just keep some hardware and stuff in there. But the dry hatch, simple, lock it, it's there, it's not going anywhere. It's a fairly decent size, which is nice too. You also notice, again, we have 4 extra rod holders here, which is nice. So in total on the back side for storage, it comes with 4 rod holders, plus whatever other ones that you decide that you want to add to it. Something I want to show you on this side real quick. Here underneath my paddle, let's just take the paddle off real quick. This right here is your rudder deployment system. So the rudder actually sits up in where it acts more like a skeg and just kind of keeps you straight, but if you want to actually steer real hard with it at all, you're going to need to release it. Releasing it allows it to drop down, and it's very much like a switchblade rudder from native. So there it is, and when it's pulled up, you can't really turn it all that much, but when it's pulled up, it's out of the way and you can drag the kayak. It's a nice design. It actually allows for really good handling, okay, coming back around, this is the back of the well. So in the well, we have a very large well, and there are 2 scupper plugs here. I think there's 10 total scupper holes along this kayak that you can use to drain out water if water comes in for whatever reason. Well, you have this very large well, the bright orange bungee cords. More importantly, they come with hooks, so you can kind of hook as necessary. It comes with 6 total pegs. I have 2 here, 2 here. Here's my anchor. And what you can do is kind of design this however you need to fit whatever you have in the back of your well, which is actually really nice. Here, underneath this box, underneath this panel, sorry, is your steering control, and that allows you to switch between both foot or the hand control. Again, we have rail system here, and the one thing that I want to complain about, at least with the rail system, is if you notice this is beveled right here, so I can slide my track equipment in this way. On the back side, we're missing that, so everything has to go in one side, and that's the same for the stuff up here. You can see it's beveled right there, and it's not beveled here. So that's one thing I think could be improved. If we had this kind of angle on both sides to allow us to use both sides of the track without having to funnel everything through one side, especially on the well, because on the well, I have these in place to kind of set up my bungee cords. I don't want to have to remove them and put them back in the entire time. Plus these, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's like a little metal washer with a screw that goes down through, and it's not the most fun thing to try to line up and make fit in there. Let's talk about the very back, and this is where, I hate to say it, but this is where the kayak kind of disappoints me the most. Now for some of you, this will be actually pretty good. We have 2 sets of brass fittings here, and it's made so you can put a power pole system in, and you can have one on each side. I've seen people do it where they're running 2. If that's you, then this might be for you. But the one thing that I don't like about this is there's no real kind of setup for a motor mount, especially if you're going to do transom. Now I have seen motor mounts for the bow, but then most of them are kind of custom fit. And like I said, this isn't like a huge company like Hobie or Native or Old Town, so I haven't found any prefabricated motor mounts for like the bow. I know that they make Bixby, I believe they partnered with Bixby, makes one for the back here. I'm not 100% sure how it connects, but I modified my old motor mount that you've seen on my Native, and I originally had it to fit these brass fittings. So when I turned it on the back of this kayak, and I think this is where they kind of skimped a little bit on some plastic, flexed pretty hard, and being afraid that I'm going to probably rip these out, I decided we needed to refit the motor mount so that it sat inside the rails and then was cushioned back here. They do have this nice handle back here, but I highly recommend not loading your kayak up fully and then lifting up on this, as there is a little bit of flex with it, as you can see. Again, I think it's just because the back of the kayak here is probably where they skimped a little bit on plastic. The rest of the kayak feels solid, it's really well made, and then the back is kind of the weak point, unfortunately. Now this rail has 2 brass fittings in it. You put a flag in it, something like that. It's nice if you just want to load the kayak onto the cart, but again, I would not load this kayak up and then try to lift it from here. But there is a solution. If we go underneath here, I don't know if you can see it or not, put this upside down. So right here is a handle, and there's one on either side, so you can lift the kayak up. That way you won't have to use this. And you'll notice that if I go to load this and it's heavy, when I go to take it off the kayak, off the cart, I am going to pick it up from the bottom, just so that I don't possibly damage the kayak. The kayak is a tunnel haul kind of style, and it's very, very stable. I'll demonstrate this in a little bit. Let me get this rigged up and show you how I have it fully rigged, and then we'll kind of go from there. But so far, so good. There are some downsides, like I said. For the most part, I'm pretty impressed with what I have so far. Okay, so let me go over this thing almost fully rigged up. I don't have everything on. I was just gonna come out and demo the stability and stuff, but the launch I'm looking down here is inundated with grass and stuff, so I'm not getting out this way. So I'll have to go out a little bit later. But for right now, let me go over how I have everything rigged up and what it looks like, and the concerns that I have when I rigged everything up, so that you can kind of avoid the same things. Because the kayak itself, just as a pedal kayak for $2,000, fin drive is actually, in my opinion, pretty good. And with the exception of like the back area, everything else is pretty solid on this kayak. So let me go over the things I had to do to get it rigged up, and the things I kind of struggled with, so that you don't have to worry about those things. All right, so this is the basic rig up. So there's not a lot of extra stuff added to it, thank goodness. Like the kayak's big enough as is. I don't need a ton of stuff. I don't have the rods, but with my yak gear box back here, I could technically have 7 rods on deck, which is really, really nice. So I've got it kind of bunged in there, not completely secured like I normally would have it, but you get the idea. Now I want to start with the motor, because this is the big thing. If you are going to run a transom motor, so if you're going to run like a Bixby or let's say something that's a little bit bigger, like a Minn Kota, or you want to run like a Torpedo like I have now. I have the 403 AC, so it's the smaller motor with the bigger battery. To get it mounted, I originally was going into these brass inserts, which didn't work because it's too heavy. It's going to hurt the kayak with the pull of the motor. And then these brass inserts, in case you're wondering, because it took me about 15 different tries to finally get this, 6M 1mm. 6M 1mm screws is what you're looking for. Because that didn't work, what I ended up doing is modifying again, drilling some holes up here in the old mount and running the wing nut screws that I had on the native back up through here. And because this is a little bit uneven, as you can see, and that's something, there's going to be a gap here because this is higher obviously than this. What I ended up doing is running 2 wing nuts, one on top and one on the bottom, to stabilize so it's not going anywhere. Now, remember when I said the rail up at the front is nice, but there's a big gap between here and the back railing. That affects 2 things. It affects my cord for my controls for my Torqeedo, and it also affects affects how I store the Torqeedo in the up position. So the Torqeedo in that position, I didn't have enough cord. Now, you should have enough cord when you originally get it. I cut it to the size I needed. So to extend it, all I did is I took some paracord and I ran it up here, and it sits on this roto holder, and I made a loop knot. So problem solved. For the motor control is a little bit different because the cord for the motor control itself is not long enough up here. So I can't modify that. So it's not going to reach that. But what I did do is, because I had the seat back far enough, so I have room to pedal, which if you're a tall person, you may struggle a little bit with this, pushing the seat all the way back, and you have to put the pedal controls all the way forward. But for me, it works out because that gives me space to put my throttle control for my Torqeedo right here on the seat railing. So that's where it now sits. And really, that's about it in terms of things I had to kind of change. Now, the other thing was with the motor, I had to, again, put in that sealant here, and it's just weather seal that you put on windows or screen doors. I put that there to keep the water from kind of flowing up too much. But that helped solve the issue, and there's no problems with that. So minimum modifications, but that's it, fully rigged, or mostly rigged. And you can see there's plenty of room in it. So the only thing left is to take this bad boy out and show you guys what it can do in the water, and the pluses and minuses of being out in the water. Like I said, this is a good kayak, I feel, and I would strongly recommend it at this point, but I'll let you guys make the decision based on everything I'm going to show you. Okay, so I didn't get a chance to go back out yesterday. I had to move to a different ramp because the ramp I was at to test the kayak was kind of inundated. I didn't know that. So we're out here today now, different day, but we're gonna test this kayak out on the water, and I'm gonna show you some of the good and bad things about it. Now, let's talk about first things first, stability and capacity. So the stability of this kayak is really, really good. I can stand up pretty easily. I can wobble side to side. I don't feel like it's going to tip or go in the water. Just gonna make sure I don't do too. I don't want my camera to fall off by accident. You can walk around, no problem up here. I have no problems walking around. You see the camera's wobbling everywhere, but I feel pretty stable. And there's plenty of space up here to kind of walk around in, so you can see it. You know, we got plenty of space to walk up. Not that you'd ever want to really walk up in there, but you can if you need to. I'm saying there's plenty of deck space on here to walk around and feel comfortable in. The kayak is really, really stable. It's more stable than my Native 10, obviously. This is a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, so that contributes to it. But I've never felt in this kayak like I was ever going to tip over walking back and forth. Now, keep in mind, you have to watch out for those pegs. Remember these pegs I'm talking about? You got to watch out for these. You don't want to step on them, because it kind of hurts. Now, as far as capacity, this kayak, for only being 77 pounds, allows for, I think it's like over 600 pounds in terms of total weight capacity, which is really good, especially if you have a ton of junk that you bring with you. I know I had a ton with me when I go fishing in my Native, and to have, I guess, the ability to put more in it is good. I know some people will get absolutely bogged down in their kayak. They'll have 9, 10 rods, giant crates, other things like that. You know, a motor mount on both ends, maybe like a Torqeedo or a Newport vessel on the back, and then some type of Minn Kota or a 3XI on the front. So it allows you to be able to do that, which is nice. If we want to talk about, you know, how stable the kayak is, let me reattach this. So one of the things I found really impressive is with this kayak, if for whatever reason I need to get in the back bow to get to my motor, I couldn't do that with my Native. But with this kayak, I can get back here. Hopefully I don't trip over everything. You know, I can get back here, no problem. You can see to work on my motor, I can reach it. The well is, you know, I wouldn't recommend standing in the well the entire time. I remember I talked about how the back of the kayak is a little bit weaker than the front, but I can get back here, I can reach my motor, I can pull it up. If I have to clear it, I can, you know, release the pin and do that. I've done it in the past when I was testing this kayak. And just so you're all aware, I did spend a good month prior to doing this video, tangled up my cord here, figuring out what I could or couldn't do inside of this kayak. Because I didn't want to do a review on this kayak, especially with, you know, Vanhunks sponsoring the FKBT and them being maybe not like the most well-known brand. I didn't want to give this just a first impression thing. I wanted to give it a true review. So the kayak's super stable. I don't think everybody's going to run back into the back of their well, but it has the ability to hold me. I'm 5'9", I'm 165 pounds right now. So getting back there was no problem. I mean, besides climbing over the seat and stuff, but it will hold you. Now let's talk about some other important things with this kayak. I want to show you the one thing that I think could be done better in terms of the scupper plug placement. So if you look at these scupper plugs, so you see this scupper plug here, notice this foam padding, which is nice, it's comfortable on the feet. If the water has to be over the foam padding to get to the scupper plug, I feel like if we had a little channel here, one there, and then one for the two up front, it would drain water a lot better that gets in here. Now, if I get the torpedo going, you'll see what I talk about when I say the water comes through the sides of this box here in the middle, which is why I put that weather sealant on it. Now, typically when I'm running, I leave the pedals in, but I push them flat, which is nice. It means I don't have to pull them out. You can see the water start to pull up here and there. It doesn't so much come up through the center, but it will do that. I'm not at full speed. I'm at full speed now. The weather sealant kind of keeps it out of there, which is good. And like I mentioned before, these two tunnels right here allow the water to go back to those two scupper plugs in the back behind the seat and drain out no problem. That's one thing you want to be aware of. Without that weather sealant in there, the water would come up quite a bit. And it's because this box doesn't sit completely snug in there like the toolbox that comes with this kayak. Now let's talk about the pedal drive. Like I said, I don't pull it out unless I have to. And what's nice is I took this down to Fellsmere, because what better place to test the pedal's weedlessness than Fellsmere. So we took it down to Fellsmere, and for the most part, I could pedal the entire day. It was no problem. This drive is actually pretty smooth. It's pretty comparable to either like the Vibe or the 180. I would say the 180 and the Hobie stuff is probably just a little bit smoother, but I have no problem pedaling this. And we get pedaling and going here, 2.5, 3 miles an hour is what we're looking at, comfortable speed. If I really huff it, I can definitely get faster than I was in my native, and I can get easily 3.5, 4 miles an hour, but that's if I'm like really huffing it. Right now I'm sitting at 4. That's not, for me, that's not going to be sustainable. But if I need to get somewhere short, that's a bigger burst of speed I can get out of this than I could with the prop drive on my native. So that's why I really like these. The only time I've ever had to pull the drive up is when it got super shallow, or the hydrilla is like really topped out. Like, I mean, like really thick. Like I'm gonna have to push myself over it. That's when I'd pull it out, because obviously it would drag. Now be careful with this, because if you look at this drive system, it does not have the kick-ups like it does on the 180. So you want to be careful that if you are going over stuff, you're not going to hit it. If you do hit it, it's going to break it. But they do send 2 extra fins with it, which is nice. And again, if you're not fishing in really grassy lakes, you're up in the northern, you're fishing more of those reservoirs, those rocky lakes, and you want to have instant reverse, they do sell a prop drive for this kayak as well. So you can pick that up. Again, it's a little bit more expensive, but it'll give you that instant reverse that this one is lacking. Now, for those of you who aren't running the pedal drive or motor and just want to get this, let's say, to paddle, more power to you. Without all the heavy stuff in it, she actually paddles pretty well. She does not turn well like the native. Like, I can't get her to turn on a dime, mostly because of the rudder and how big the kayak is. Remember, it's 13 foot. But paddling, I can easily get about 2.5 miles an hour. I'm not really trying to huff it with that. I'm not trying to blow out my back though. So it paddles comfortably. It's not as maneuverable as my native because it's a little bit bigger. So you may want to keep that in mind if you're going in like real tight spaces or things like that. That's the one thing I really haven't tested out with this kayak yet, is being in like a real tight space, like a creek or something. Although I think it'll be fine. Now I've deployed the rudder. Let's talk about handling on this bad boy. This is something that I was quite impressed by. So with that rudder, that's kind of that switchblade style where it's dropped down and now I have full turn on the rudder. I'm gonna crank it. This actually has like a really good turning radius. Like I'm almost, not quite, but I'm almost spinning at spot. It's a pretty good turning radius. And if you take a look at this, we'll flip it back the other way. Like she turns really, really well. That's something I was very, very impressed by. The handling on this kayak actually is pretty good. Again, the main complaint is that the cord here, you'll have to tie it several times to make sure that it stretches out and stays tight. Now let's talk about having the motor on the back. Now, you can have a transom motor on this, or you can have a bow mount. I've seen fabrications for bow mounts, but they look more like they were homemade. Or adaptions of pre-existing ones. You may want to do some research on that. I don't have a lot of info on it. The only thing I saw was like in an owner's group on Facebook where someone had created a bow mount for this and then had modified it so they could put a trolling motor on the top. This kayak will definitely handle it. It's more than stable enough to do it. It's just, again, Vanhunks not being like a Hobie or a Native or an Old Town, there's not a lot of prefabricated stuff that I could find out there. But if you know of prefabricated stuff like motor mounts and things, opposite of what they sell on the website, things for like an XI3 or some other type of motor in the back, like a Torpedo mount, feel free to put it in the comments. I'm sure that people interested would want to know, and I personally want to know. So I have my prefabricated mount that I made from Starboard in the back. This used to be on my native, and let me talk about the ups and downs of this having the motor. So one thing I found is this kayak I wish it were just a little bit faster, and I think it has to do with the hull design. So she's super stable. Yeah, she's long and sleek for her size, and she handles really well. Like you can see I'm turning right there pretty hard. But the one thing I found is because of the hull design, which allows that stability, and because the back end, remember I said there's probably a little bit less plastic back there than the rest of the kayak, because of the back end being a little bit thinner, she sits up really high in the water. And you can kind of see back here how high let's see if I can turn you just a hair. You can see how high that kayak is sitting back there in that water. So I have my Torpedo trimmed down the whole way. Like I've got a good, I don't know, almost 6-7 inches where she's up out of the water. So I have my Torpedo trimmed down the entire way, just so that I get enough propulsion, I guess is the word to say, to allow me to use the motor as best as possible. Now when I have the cart and the crate and other stuff back in there, it's no problem. And I found that when you're gonna hear it here, when I get to max speed, it's gonna burble. Right there, you hear how the motor just got faster. It's because it's not catching in the water, because the hull design is creating a burble where the motor's not getting traction. So right now I'm sitting at about 4.2 miles an hour, 4.3, 4.2, which is slower than my native at lightweight speed. At full weight, that native kayak's only going 4.2, 4.3, so same speed as this. With full weight in it, it's with the weight pulled out, me just running it slick, then it's running somewhere closer to 4.5. But what I did find out is when we do get weight in the back and it allows the kayak to sit lower in the water, that burble doesn't affect the motor as much, because obviously the water's not churning the same way because the kayak's sitting lower. And when it's doing that, I'm actually getting close to 5 miles an hour. In like ideal conditions with a slight breeze, I could easily clear 5. I know that their mahi-mahi, which is a different version of a fishing kayak that they have, the mahi-mahi version, which is smaller, if you put a Torpedo on the back of that, you could get anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5 miles an hour depending on conditions. So it's not ideal if I'm running it like this, but I left it well empty so I could climb back there and show you what's going on. But if we got some weight back there just to push the back end down just a little bit, then when it catches, I'm flying. and I like it. It's much faster than the native in that aspect. Okay, with that being said, the last thing I want to add is that the guys who run the shop down in Sarasota, the guys who do a lot of the work down there, Ivan and Tyrone, I just want to say that they are extremely nice and they're extremely personable, and getting in touch with them to order this fin drive and get this kayak delivered, and the questions that I had about it before, while I was trying to build up everything I wanted to do with it, I would just want to say that those guys are amazing. Like, the customer service is really, really good. I've seen stories in some of the owner groups and stuff where people say, well, we got a kayak shipped, but it was damaged, or this wasn't working, and they were also very complimentary of both Ivan and Tyrone and the rest of the crew down there for taking care of them very quickly and being even easy to get a hold of. I know there's some kayak companies, big ones, where getting a hold of somebody is kind of a pain in the butt, and they usually want you to go to the dealer, but these guys right now are trying to grow the brand, and they're doing a lot of the stuff on their own. And I really appreciate just the fact that they were able to answer questions in a timely manner too. I'm talking like less than 24 hours. I sent out an email, they sent me one back. I was texting Tyrone and Ivan back and forth. So, for them to respond and be as, happy to help and happy to, deliver and answer questions as they were, to me was like, because I'm so used to people kind of not doing that. And I even worked in retail when I was younger. So I try to be a good person and answer people's stuff as fast as possible. And just that the amount of customer service is actually pretty good. Now, I'm sure there are some stories out there where things didn't work out the right way for whatever reason, one reason or another. But my experience, and from what I can see in the reviews that other people have put up, the overall experience with the customer service and the way that they treat the customers seems to be pretty positive, which is a good thing if you're looking for a company to support, or if you want to buy a product from them. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is recap everything. You can make your decision on how you feel about this kayak. Again, I'm not sponsored by them. I won this, so I didn't pay for it, so nothing came out of my pocket, except I paid for the drive. But if we want to talk about this kayak from top to bottom, here's all the positives. Actually, let me start with the negatives. I'd rather start with the negatives and end on the positives. Start with the negatives, I think, and they're all really kind of minor things. I wish that the drive box was sat in there a little bit tighter to kind of keep the water out, but we solved that with the weather stripping. The front rail system, I think, is a little bit short. I think it's plenty long, but it's a little bit short in terms of coming back, which kind of creates an issue if I want to have my torpedo mount up here. But again, we solved that by putting it in the rails right here. So it's not things that you can't overcome. It's just small kind of things that probably weren't thought about. The back end of the kayak is my biggest complaint. It's really light. Like I said, if you have some weight back there, the torpedo will stay low enough in the water, but it's also kind of thin. So when you go to lift it up, and it's fully loaded, you don't want to use that back handle. When I do it, I'm afraid that handle is going to bust off, especially if the kayak's fully loaded. They do have the solution, which is the handles underneath, but sometimes that can be kind of hard, especially if the kayak's really heavy or you've got like the motor mount on it, like I have to hold it like this. So for me, it's no problem. For people with maybe not as long as arms or aren't as tall, that might be an issue. And the other thing that I want to bring up is that it doesn't have a dry well. I wish it had a dry well, but we solved that with dry bags and stuff. So nothing in the kayak setup beyond like the back being really thin is something that is deal breaking to me. And I even was, I solved that, but I solved that I had to create a mount or refit my pre-existing mount to make it work. So a lot of the stuff that I think are complaints are just real minor. Again, stuff like I wish the scupper plugs up here, I wish there was a little bit more of a cut in the padding so that the water could actually easily drain into the scupper plugs. But those are all really kind of minor things. If we talk about the positives, it's a $1,450 or $1,450 kayak approximately with the pedal drive or fin drive system. You're looking at right around $2,000 for a 13-foot kayak with over a 600-pound capacity, and that you can easily still car top. The other thing is there's a lot of really ingenuitive stuff in here, or maybe not ingenuitive, but things that obviously they took some thought when designing. The toe steering, the handle steering, the option to have both, and they easily switch over just by tying out the box in the front just for your fish finder, the guard for the for the transducer underneath, the pedal drive system, the options to kind of switch out pedal drive system, the fact that this will also take, like, it will probably take a Vibe, but I know for sure it'll take a Hobie 180. The tray that comes with this, the drainage system, just the big back well, all the different options that this comes with, you know, that's, to me, is really important in a kayak. So they have all the options I would ever want. There's just this, my complaints are small and minor compared to what I think you could think up of some other kayaks. So overall, this is going to be my new battle rig. I will hold on to the Native just for a little while, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. It's served me really well for the past 4 years, and I don't regret buying it whatsoever. I think that the Native Slayer Maxes and the Titans and stuff are fantastic kayaks. But for the most part, I've had her for 4 years. She's kind of beat up, and I need a little bit more room, and this kind of serves that purpose. So I'm quite satisfied with it. If you're interested in looking up Vanhunks kayaks, paddle boards and things like that, I will leave the link in the description. Again, they're a Florida-based shop, is in Sarasota. I'm very happy with this. I'm happy with the customer service. I do highly recommend it if you're looking at a kayak that's not going to break the bank, that's also a pedal kayak. You may also want to take a look at their Mahi Mai series. So that being said, that's my review of the Vanhunks Elite Pro Angler 13. I do recommend it. Just understand that if you want to put on certain motors, if you're going to fish it like I fish it, that you may have to do a little bit of DIY or do a little bit of research, but the benefits to me outweigh the negatives that I could possibly come up with it. I've had it for a month, I've run her pretty hard, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. Does that mean I'll stick with this kayak forever? I don't know. But right now, I think it's a really solid kayak, and one at least worth taking a look at if you're not sure where to start. So that's going to do it for me. I'm going to make a couple casts and try to get out of here before the storms roll in. We've got some storms coming in this afternoon. Check them out. I'll leave the links in the description for the shop and their Facebook page. Feel free to reach out to them. They're nice people. That being said, I'm out of here. Stay safe. I will catch you guys in the next one.